Ragnar Lodbrok, the commander we all wanted to be amazing when the Vikings landed. He's really just okay and maybe has a special role in KVK seasons 1 through 3. In this video, we're going to give you everything you need to know about this commander, including the very best talents and pairings, so stick around for how you can get some value out of this new Viking legendary. Hello my friends and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and this video has been sponsored by the makers of Rise of Kingdoms. And I wanted to come in here guns blazing talking about how amazing this commander would be. We all wanted some new awesome Viking commander, and I think the reality here is that he's fine, but he's kind of like Julius Caesar, Freddy. Those are commanders that are just going to lose a lot of value very quickly as you make your way toward this season of conquest, which is where everybody really should aspire to hang out and play in the end game, unless you're migrating back constantly, but that's a separate idea. So in this video, we're going to talk about what works on this commander, why they fall a little bit short, and how you can use them in the early game to get some value. We'll give you talents, we'll give you pairings, and let's start with the things that I actually do like about this commander. I like that they are giving you a damage boost. Now, damage boost means normal attacks, counter attacks, skill damage, the whole kit and caboodle. It's also reducing the damage you take. Normal attacks, counter attacks, skill damage. It's pretty solid. 30% damage boost, 15% damage taken. Now, most of us aren't going to have him expertised, and I wouldn't recommend you use Universal Legendary Commander Sculptures on him, but if you did expertise him, it goes from being a 4-second buff to a 5-second buff on his active skill, and it goes from 30% damage boost to 40% damage boost and 20% damage taken reduction instead of 15. That's a nice jump in the effectiveness of his active skill. But the rest of his kit needs to carry. And the reason I say that is that if you have an active skill that doesn't do area of effect damage, and you got to have something that's going to make you really, really good for either rallies or open field in the rest of your kit. So let's get a look at what he's got here. And the second skill, good news, it's not the conquering skill. You can get a nice 20% attack boost. That is not very premium these days. Season of Conquest, the way that technology works there in the later seasons of KVK, you're going to get tons of attack from other places. You'd really much prefer defense or health for efficient trades. That said, I think as a community, Rise of Kingdoms is undervaluing the extent to which attack accelerates the conclusion of a fight. In other words, attack will make a fight end faster, which is super relevant in a lot of situations. That said, there is also a healing effect reduction on here, which is what makes Ragnar unique in the early game in Rise of Kingdoms. This is yet another commander that is perhaps attempting to balance the effectiveness of Richard I in the early game, and maybe I should say the dominance of Richard I healing in the very first portion of the game, which will fade off, but he's still quite good for a very long time. So this gives you a way to cut the healing by 40%. That lasts 3 seconds, but can only trigger every 5. So far, the kit is fine, but it's the rest of things that really make this fall off. The next skill is damage for cities only, and unfortunately, most players will get 0 or near 0 value from this. The next skill is going to give you 10% extra troop capacity for rallies and open field, and when we just look at the whole kit that Ragnar has, he's kind of a blend of like Julius Caesar and Mehmed smashed together. You take a couple skills here, a couple skills there, and it's about the same sort of a thing. So the difference, however, between Ragnar and those other commanders is that Julius Caesar kind of goes pretty heavily into the realm of being very tanky, right? His active skill gives you 20% defense. His second skill, among other things, bunch of damage boost, right, and attack. His second skill is going to make you really tanky, and this is all about being in the open field, 15% extra troop capacity. The thing I like about Mehmed is that he does area of effect damage. which is really, really solid. Really solid. He boosts the amount of damage that you're going to be doing by boosting your attack, your skill damage. He's got this exact same fourth skill. It's like literally the identical fourth skill over here. The problem I have, however, with Ragnar is that failing to have AoE damage and march speed means that he's not going to be great in the open field. The thing he has to be good at to be a worthy commander, especially because he's useful for hitting cities here, is that he has got to be a great rally commander. And the question is he really a great rally commander? Would you use him? Now, the thing I will say that is encouraging is that by the time KVK Season 1 rolls around, it's going to be pretty hard to get together an all-cav rally, an all-archer rally, an all-infantry rally. There is theoretically a possibility here that you could use Ragnar to launch rallies and use mixed troops, which I know sounds a little bit crazy, but the reality is that players that are experiencing KVK1 for the very first time are going to struggle with things like reinforcing the rally with the right troop type. So it doesn't hurt to have a combo that's a little more open-ended. It's not going to be the end of the world if you send the wrong troop type, even though equipment does go a long way on some of these commanders. So unlike Mehmed, who does have a role in open field and canyon for an extended period because of his area of effect damage, the thing about Ragnar Lodbrok is that he is not giving you that same sort of utility. He's basically a clone of Julius Caesar, but less tanky and probably does a little bit of utility with the healing effect reduction, but otherwise isn't all that exciting. Now, if you were going to do one of those rallies that I was just suggesting, where you go in and you say, okay, I'm going to launch a rally with Ragnar. What talents would I use? He's got leadership, conquering, and the attack tree, which coincidentally are almost identical to another commander that we don't use at all anymore in Rise of Kingdoms, and that's Hannibal Barca, a commander that is strong in the early game. You could pair a Hannibal with Ragnar, but the thing that's a little bit weird about Ragnar, and I know I'm about to talk about talents here, but the thing that's a little bit weird about Ragnar is that, at least with Julius Caesar, okay, you can get Julius Caesar from the Mightiest Governor. So a whale could go in, get a bunch of sculptures of Julius, and at least it wouldn't be such a massive sculpture investment to invest him, and you're helping out your kingdom, and you're going to launch some rallies. Okay, I get it, right? I get that. The thing that's weird about Ragnar is that unless they change up the Mightiest Governor cycle, he's only going to come from gold keys. So if you were to invest in this commander, which doesn't feel like a good idea to me, not only would maxing him out mean that every time you get him in a gold key, he's worthless, but also I just don't think his value is going to hold or carry for a prolonged period. So if we look again at talents, and you're going to use him as a primary, what could you use? Barca's got the exact same options. This is a build that I have occasionally used for hitting cities with siege. This is probably not what you're doing in the early game, unless, I don't know, you're like hitting some cities in your kingdom because things are still getting sorted out and the sort of pecking order and who's going to own the temple and all that kind of stuff. This is a build that I was using for just like if you're going to swarm a city, take some resources. This could be a thing, but more likely you're looking for an open field build, and this is a build that you're probably looking for. Now, a lot is going to depend on who you pair Ragnar with as the secondary commander. If you have a secondary commander that doesn't do skill damage or the skill damage is very low, I would encourage you to shave off the 3 points from Steely Soul, the 2 points over here from Unyielding, and go all the way into Martial Mastery, increasing your normal attack damage, but at the cost of active skill damage. That is a fantastic choice if you're using two commanders that do not do active skill damage. Ragnar doesn't do active skill damage. In this build, we've gone for a mixed troop composition. In other words, we're expecting you to have mixed troops to get value from armed to the teeth or armored to the teeth. Also, we've gone in and gotten effortless, which really helps a lot for prolonged fights, giving you a really solid damage boost over time. And I do like Fight to the Death. It is a very, very strong talent. Just in general, all damage dealt by 6%, but also increases your damage taken by 3%. I'm okay with it. The trade-off here is generally very, very strong, unless you're just getting swarmed into oblivion, in which case maybe it's a little problematic. But if you're rallying, it's totally fine because, man, the amount of counterattack damage you're dealing back is just going to be really wild. If we look over here, I've also taken Buckler Shield from the Conquering Tree. I think that is a really great choice for reducing the damage that you're taking when you're smashing into other players. And if you were to launch a rally, I do actually think it's pretty important that you pick up Close Formation. When the army, led by this commander, is below 50% strength, increase all attack. After you have your 4 points in this, it's going to be 12%. So one final build you could do, and I've got this marked off as a Sunset Canyon build, which I think this is actually pretty good for Sunset Canyon, is that because you're going to be getting below 50%, you will definitely get the benefit of Close Formation, which is why I've picked up that talent. You also could use this for rallying. And if you were going to use just a single troop type in a rally, which would be very reasonable to assume that you would, you could shed these points Armed to the Teeth and Armored to the Teeth, drop them into Name of the King, and your bonus point could go over here in Unyielding. Depending on your pair, you could go and pick up this over here, Martial Mastery. I think that would be perfectly reasonable. But I think this gives you a pretty good sense of what you could do for either Canyon or Rallying. Now, do I think this commander, Ragnar, should be used for Canyon? I mean, I suppose they're offering a Julius Caesar-like option, but Julius Caesar has probably a little bit more tankiness because of his second skill. So this brings us to the pairings. What are you going to, like, who just do you pair Ragnar with in the early game in Rise of Kingdoms? And I struggle with this a little bit because the active skill of Ragnar is going to go and offer a very nice effect. You would want to pair with a commander that optimally has a way of keeping the uptime of that effect very, very high. So a commander that generates rage. That way you have the attack boost, or really the damage boost, and the damage taken reduction for as much time as possible. So commanders that would do something like that for you in the open field, as an example, would be Constantine Primary with Ragnar Secondary. The problem is you're just going to like run around and tickle people and they'll just ignore you, right? You might be very tanky and have a lot of sustain, but it just doesn't seem amazing to me. You could pair with a commander like Richard I. Neither is doing a lot of skill damage, or any skill damage. You'd use Ragnar as the secondary commander. He doesn't need to be the primary in this configuration. You're doing healing. You're cutting healing of the enemy. There's honestly some cool utility there. I think it'd be okay. A commander that would help you bang out a lot of rage, so you'd fire off those active skills very frequently, would be Minamoto. And I mentioned Minamoto because in the early game, a lot of people are going to have him maxed that have gone in and done some spending. It's not perfect. You need to use the Minamoto primary, and you're going to have some talent points that you're using on Minamoto go to waste. For instance, all for one after you use active skill on your primary commander. The secondary commander's active skill damage is boosted. That's not going to do anything in this instance. But I think it would be a mistake to overlook Ragnar as the secondary to Minamoto. Saladin, however, is probably a better pair. In fact, almost certainly a better pair. And the reason I say that is that the support tree does not care at all about skill damage. So I think that actually having that support tree in either the Constantine or the Saladin is going to help you fire off the active skill of Ragnar very quickly. Keep the uptime really high, elevate your own damage, reduce your own damage taken, and honestly, you might, with the 5-second duration of that ability, still have the damage boost active when Saladin's turn comes back around again for his his active skill cycle to fire off all over again to get that damage boost on the active skill. That could be pretty good. I did skip over Charles Martel. I think the two will be fine paired together. Charles Martel primary and Ragnar secondary has the same problem that you'd have with Richard I. You run around tickling people, but, sure, you'll get some efficient trades, but not do much. Meanwhile, all the high damage marches are just getting, they're getting eaten alive while you're just sitting there tickling the enemy. You could use Hannibal Barca as a pairing. They have the exact same talent trees, so it doesn't exactly matter who would be the primary commander in this instance. I suppose there's a little bit of a skill damage dealt boost over here. So even with some of these early game commanders, there's lacking synergy, which is just kind of a bummer. You could pair with Khan, but I don't think most people should really be investing in Khan at all. If you did, you're definitely missing out on all the skill damage boost for Ragnar, but you will get really nice uptime on the active skill. I don't like the Alexander the Great pair. I'm sure you'll get some efficient trades in the open field. The problem is that you're just not going to have a way to fire off the active skills very quickly. I do think, however, as a secondary to Ethelfled, Ragnar would do well. But here's the thing. With commanders like Ethelfled and Sun Tzu, of course, almost any commander will do well paired with them. That's because they themselves are really good commanders. So yeah, you could put Ragnar with Ethelfled because Ethelfled's good. You could put, Ragnar with Sun Tzu because Sun Tzu is good. These are commanders that will elevate just about anybody. And so I'm not entirely sure why we're going out of our way to elevate the Ragnar compared to some of the other options we could have. Now, once you get into this season of Conquest, there will be some other curiosities here, like Attila with a Ragnar secondary, but I don't think that's going to be as good as Takeda as a secondary for the same reason that you wouldn't use Julius Caesar as the secondary over here. I just don't think that's going to make a lot of sense. On the topic of Julius Caesar, you could pair Julius Caesar with Ragnar. I think it would be fine. They'd be tanky, they'd run around, they'd tickle stuff, but they themselves would not be doing very much on the battlefield. I do not like a Frederick I pairing. He is trying to fire off active skills very, very frequently. And, I mean, it's kind of like the same anti-synergy of Minamoto primary with Ragnar secondary. Like, you can do it, but the Ragnar is not really contributing a ton to the Frederick I in this combination. When we look at a commander like Mehmed, I mean, you could pair with him, but he's boosting skill damage. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. And you can hear my lack of excitement for the possibilities for pairing with Ragnar, right? Like, I could go through every commander in here, like Lu Bu, but I just find myself missing some excitement for where he could be good. So let's talk just very briefly about a couple epic pairings that I think could be decent in the early game, and then talk about where I think Ragnar's kind of best uses will be as we wrap up this video. I do want to mention, as I said earlier, Sun Tzu would be a pretty solid pairing. He's going to do for Ragnar several things. He's going to generate a lot of rage, which Ragnar really wanted. You're going to miss out on a little bit of the skill damage boost synergy here, which is a bummer, but at least you're going to be elevating your tankiness, which Ragnar actually kind of needs. I think that for other early game pairings, you could look at like Joan of Arc with Ragnar. Ragnar will be the secondary. You see this theme here of using him as a secondary to support tree commanders, in my opinion, being fairly powerful. I like the possibility of Pelagius primary with a Ragnar secondary. That is because you're using the cavalry skill tree, which, okay, a little bit of anti-synergy, but at least you're generating some extra rage when you use active skills. Keep the uptime high on Ragnar's abilities. You could use Boudica in the very early game. Paired with Ragnar, you're a little bit of a sitting duck because you don't have any march speed. So if you get caught out, you are just gonna get melted, which is gonna be certainly an issue. Where would I use Ragnar? In the early game, if you're looking for a commander and you're open up just a bunch of gold keys anyways, and you unlock him, and you either put a small amount of universals into him, which I wouldn't recommend, right? Get him to a 5-5-1-1 and then stop. Or you just get a bunch of his sculptures really early on. You could use the Ragnar combinations in the open field. You could hunt Richard I because there will be very few counters to him available in the early game. And Ragnar is going to cut healing. And so that will at least be a way to go and deal with Richard I. If you're going to do that, you'd want to have mostly archers in that march to really go all in on taking out Richard I. But that's going to make you a little bit vulnerable to all the Minamotos running around on the field. I think there's definitely some testing to be done with Ragnar and in the early game as a rally lead. I mean, I remember in the very early game, I mean, way back when, people were rallying using Julius Caesar, and Julius Caesar's not that great of a commander, to be perfectly honest. Not for rallies. He's got two skills that are going to be completely irrelevant. when you're battling into anything other than a player's city. So at least Ragnar has one more skill worth of utility. The 10% rally capacity is actually very solid. So if what you wanted to do was rally structures in the early game, I mean, I still really feel like Esong and El Cid is a really great combination. I still feel like Minamoto and Double C might be a fine starting point that you probably wanted to do something with anyways for Barbarian forts. But if you're using leadership commanders and for whatever reason they're garrisoning with Richard I, yeah, Ragnar's anti-healing will certainly help out. But let me know down below in the comments, like, where do you think this commander, Ragnar, is going to be good? Is there any pairing that I missed? Something that we really should have talked about but didn't? I'd certainly be curious for that. Let me know down below in the comments. And if you're looking for a guide on the new Epic Commander, I'll have a card up in the top on the Viking Epic Commander. We just released that guide recently for Bjorn Ironside. This commander actually I think is pretty solid in the early game and is a better investment for most early game players. If you found this guide helpful, throw a like on here and consider subscribing. And until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.